This is the Doc and Eric Dubin with SD Weekly Metals and Markets Wrap. Joining us today is our good friend and silver expert, David Morgan of themorganreport.com. David, it's great to have you back with us.
Well, it's great to be back with you. Thank you.
Well, finally, we have you on the show when gold and silver have had some excitement to the upside over the last couple of months. It certainly has been nice to see gold and silver on most days getting some traction to the upside instead of being down seemingly incessantly for the past years, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, I tried calling the bottom a few times. The last call I think I got right, which was like the last day of November 2015. I said, that's it. And there are others out there saying that's not it. It's coming back. In the early issue of 2016, January, I said, we're going to get up, for certain, which you can't use in my industry, but almost for certain, you'll see a strong January. And I think it could carry all the way through April, which is what we had. And recently for our website members, I put out a video, and John and Eric, as you know, I do those on an as-required basis. And, based on my experience, sentiment, everything I look at, I think we've probably peaked at $18 silver and $1,300 gold for a while, and certainly not for the year. And we are working our way down, but they're trading differently. Silver and gold are showing strength. You see continually increasing short positions from the commercials, and this is something that is new. I mean, basically, if you look at the commitment of traders reports from like 99, I think I looked at, till present time, it's a record high, which is interesting because if you go back to like the Paul Sarnoff days, back when the Hunt brothers were in the market, actually those volumes, which they are quite large, are not significantly large relative to how much silver was being traded back in what I call the good old days when I was your guys' age. But regardless, looking at that as well, that was an influence on me. So we'll see. Time will tell. I don't like short-term calls, but we've had such a run in the stocks in the Morgan Report, some up 200, 300, 400%, that especially with everybody that's waited so long or just become new members, I don't want to see them leave too much on the table. So, using what we say in How to Use the Morgan Report, has a 15% trailing stop on it. And if you get stopped out, the problem is if you stop out and you made 200%, wow, that's great. And it is. I mean, 200% gain on anything is great. But you don't want to, make 200%, only see it go to 2,000%. And that's tricky. And that's why I do these videos, because I have ways to mitigate that.
So essentially you're looking at a forward picture that kind of augurs for summer doldrums and then pick up later in the year at some point?
I do, barring, my caveat, which, Eric, I have to give you, and that's, who knows? I mean, there are too many black swans out there. There really are. And if I didn't say that on your program, I would really feel, horrible if something really happened, because, there's so many fuses with a match an inch away all over the globe, not only in the financial markets. So, all these changes that are going on, and this judge ruling about the Obamacare. And, these people are out there in the streets not because they're happy or it's like the fun thing to do. Some of it's based on food supply. I mean, look at Venezuela, and, it's melting down in front of our eyes. I have a bit of a pet peeve, when it's like, oh, everything's fine. This normalcy bias is people that obviously aren't paying attention, or they're half asleep because it's right in front of their faces. If they just take a few moments to really get some objective news, you've got to get off the mainstream media or the lamestream press, as it's referred to, and get on channels like yours so that you really get some information.
So what do you think as far as, forward supply for gold and silver? And we've had recent reports as far as, World Gold Council, I believe it was yesterday, talking about 21% increase in gold consumption over the first quarter, year over year. And silver companies have in particular been able to, the primary producers have been able to cut costs pretty well. And for a good chunk of time, petroleum's decline helped a lot as well. But, copper is a mess. The base metals across the board are a mess. And, with 65-70% of silver coming as byproduct, that segment of the industry is still looking pretty precarious. I was wondering if you could share with our audience what you think as far as what the forward supply looks like and where things are.
Sure. A lot to swallow, to digest it. One, Gold for first quarter of 2016 was the best quarter in 35 years. On the report you're referring to, if you studied it, and I'm sure you did, you guys are very astute, it was primarily paper gold. Not that there wasn't real gold involved, but it was primarily ETFs, or what I call holding companies, that were involved, which had such a great offtake in the gold market. On the silver side, I'll refer back to a free webinar that I did that's on our for our website members now. It's called "Is There a Silver Shortage?" And in that webinar, what I talked about was the year-over-year deficit that was in the silver market from 1999 to 2006 inclusive. So basically for 16 years continuously, there was a decrease in the above ground stockpile of silver because the overall demand was greater than the overall supply, regardless of what the demand was: investment demand, industrial demand, jewelry demand, whatever. And so we went from an above ground stockpile of 2 billion ounces in 1999 down to roughly 500 million ounces. So 1.5 billion ounces came out of the market in those 16 years. However, from 2006 to present day, there was such a boom starting roughly in 2000 for the industrial demand coming out of China for all commodities, and the commodity super cycle began, that, as you said, the base metals started to increase significantly, and there is a stockpile build even to this day. And so right now we're basically back up to about 2 billion ounces in investment form of silver. I want to be careful here. We're not talking about any form of silver, jewelry or silverware or art objects or any of that stuff. We're talking about silver from commercial bars to silver rounds and everything in between that are investment, either retail, wholesale, or institutional. So when you look at the latest report out of the Silver Institute, and believe me, I'm quite friendly with them. I mean, I've known Mike Dorenzo for quite some time, and we've spent time together. They will tell you that there was a deficit in 2015 of, I think it was 120 or 129 million ounces. I just did an update on that. And that's true based on the way they account for it. And so I'm biased silver, I'll agree there was a deficit. And this is based on investment demand. But if you look at it the way that CPM Group does, and I'm not trying to defend either side here, I'm trying to be very objective, there is still a build in above ground silver stocks. So how do you look at it? Do you look at it, are above ground stocks dwindling or increasing? That's one way to look at it. I think that's the most objective way personally, but that's my opinion. And the other way to look at it is, was total supply able to fill total demand? And if you look at it on total demand, which means mine supply, recycling together, was that equal to all demand, which comes out of artwork, silverware, industrial demand, and investment demand? The answer is no. The demand was 129 million ounces more because of such substantial investment demand from the retail side, the coin side, that they didn't meet on an annual basis. So you can take it either way you want. I think that's bullish. I like it. I'd like it even more if we could say, hey, there's we're starting to eat at the above ground stockpiles. At this point, we're not. But carrying on, because you asked me about 3 questions in a row, we are seeing, and this has been my projection for a while, that I believe we are nearing the end game, which means we are going to see precious metals do well this year and much better in 2017 and really, really good 2018, perhaps 2019. So in other words, we're looking at the third leg up, which is going to be monumental in my view. But the overall commodity cycle probably won't go along for the ride, with the exception of oil, depending on what happens in the global economy, which means the copper, tin, lead, nickel, etc., zinc, even zinc were pretty favorable too. I don't see the base metals. I don't see the overall commodity cycle coming back. I think we're too far down in this contraction, and there's too many problems to see a rebirth of the super cycle in the commodities market. But since gold and silver are money, and that's the top tier of all commodities and the most cherished because you can trade them for anything that you need, want, or must have, that's a difference between them and commodities, because they're money. They're not really commodities. At times, yeah, they act like commodities, but really they're money. So that's the way I see it, guys. I think we're going to continue to deteriorate over time on the overall global economy in a contracting, convoluted, more, excuse my slang, messed up way. And there'll be more and more pressure to things that are real, of substance, have value, and have continued to hold value, which means, food supplies, water, hard goods, and primarily precious metals on the financial side.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like a reboot of the more stagflationary period of the 70s, 80s versus super cycle China coming and compressing 50 years of industrial revolution in 10 that we saw in the last decade, with that impact to all of the commodities and bankrupt governments left and right in the West, and financial repression and negative interest rates and on and on. They're all creating a kind of a situation for monetary inflation that'll be great for gold and silver, but not necessarily for all the commodities. So I was curious. We've frequently wondered, where is the extra silver coming from that's meeting this deficit? Do you have any speculation as far as where that most likely could be sourced from?
Boy, that's a great question, and honestly, I wish I had a great answer. Yes, absolutely. It's just, one little source is what I call burrow mining. Okay, what's burrow mining? Burrow mining is all over the world, but primarily in Mexico. That's why I use the term burrow. And these are small deposits that basically you go with a pick and shovel as a metaphor, but in some cases literally, and you go into these rich veins and you chop it out and you take it home, and there it is. So that does add to supply, but that's not that significant. I mean, it's just not. It can't. But that's part. I mean, so is that the answer? The answer is no. That is not the answer.
Do you think that a good chunk of that is flying under the radar of the CPM groups of the world, just because of the nature of that kind of mining?
Well, yes, I think it flies under everybody's radar. I mean, when I first, I've been at this for so long. I mean, the annual studies used to come from Handy and Hardman, if you guys even know who that is. But they were one of the big refiners way back, again, when I was your age. But CPM's been doing this study for years. In fact, CPM used to do the study for the Silver Institute, if you may not know that. But it could be, I mean, there's rumors, and none of them I've been able to verify, like, coin melt from different countries that have had it or stockpiled it. I mean, a lot of it makes sense because, basically the world was actually on a silver standard for quite some time. And then, you can do the research that I'll tip my hat to Charles Savoy that's written for our website for so long, and now he has his own. But if you follow the money, and I mean silver in this case, and look at how dispersed it was with, during the Opium Wars at all, you'll see that, it's reasonable to think there is a lot of coin at one time, not any longer, that could be, smelted out and moved into bullion and kind of quiet. The other thing is, like, the recycling industry, pretty hard to get a handle on that. It's private. There's no public companies that I'm aware of in the recycling business. And so who knows how much, recycling is done where the owner of the entity might be pouring himself a queen-size bed in silver bullion, if you know what I mean. So, there are gaps, and yes, I've thought about it, and do I have an exact, John, Eric, it's right here, I can prove it, I know. No, I can't say that. What I can say is, yes, there is some under the radar. And as far as, where did it come from? I mean, from 1999 to 2006 inclusive, where did it come from? It came from the warehouses, basically. I mean, it came out of the stockpiles that were transparent to the public eye because we saw it. We got to witness it. We got to see what the stockpiles were on the COMEX. primarily, especially in those days, because we didn't really get all this ETF stuff and all that until later on in the cycle. And in my studied view, part of that was to obfuscate how dire the silver situation was for the bears and so awesome it was for the bulls, because you're looking at a commodity that's essential to modern life, and you're down to 500 million ounces. You're down to about, whatever that would be. Trying to think, do the math in my head, but just, a few months, 6 months or something above ground stockpile in a commodity that's money and has been, the word money and the word silver is synonymous in 52 countries on the planet still. Are you kidding me? And so if you come up with a lot of derivatives, what can you do? Well, you can take a lot of money that's going into quote unquote silver that may not quite reach the final definition or destination, if you know what I mean.
So, John, what's going on retail-wise? We're seeing a lot of people taking an interest in silver now that we've had a couple of corrections, and we keep going through this, 18 test down to 17. And people responding as far as SD bullion sales.
Yeah, demand continues to be strong. It was particularly strong that first smash towards 17, that first dollar correction from about the 18 level to the $17 level. But I mean, the U.S. Mint continues to sell every coin it can crank out on its allocation. I mean, we're 13 days into the month, and they've sold another 2.6 million Silver Eagles. They're up to just shy of 21 million coins on the year, and I mean, we're still in early May. So looks to me like we're still on pace for the upper 50 millions, which will be a new all-time record. And if you talk to all the authorized purchasers in the industry, they really don't see allocation stopping anytime soon. One interesting thing is, for as tight as the government coins, the Silver Eagles, Silver Maples, and even the government bars like the Royal Canadian Mint, 10-ounce, 100-ounce bars, those type of things, there's not currently really a shortage in a lot of the private mint rounds. So a lot of people in the industry have noted that that's rather strange. Usually kind of everything cascades off of Silver Eagles and Maples. Once those are tight, everything else kind of dries up. But there's a lot of rounds in the market right now. Can be pretty clearly seen from prices. I mean, it's been probably 5 or 6 weeks that we've been selling generic rounds at 49 cents over spot, any quantity. And really, the wholesale market still has quite a few generic rounds. It's probably the lowest premiums we've ever seen since SD Bullion has been in operation on generic rounds. And at the same time, the government coins are on allocation. They're tight, and investors are buying them up by the million every week.
Excuse me, I remember back in the summer we had a period where there were no 90% coins to be found anywhere, unless we were willing to pay $5 over spot or whatever, huge premiums. And then SD Bullion had a sale on 90% over the course of the last week or so. Is that indicative of the supply shifts as far as what's going on in the marketplace as opposed to the allocation at the mint? Has the higher prices in silver elicited a little bit more supply coming to the market?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Eric. 90%, a little bit different than the rounds. With silver jumping from the upper 13s, a little over $4 towards the $18 mark, a lot of 90% came back into the market when silver neared $18. So yeah, premiums have come down. They're still somewhat elevated. I mean, we ran a sale, I think, $2.29. The rest of the market is still, I think, in the low $3, selling at a retail level. I'm referring to for 90%. So it's still fairly elevated premium compared to a few years ago. If you remember when silver was on a tear and going through $30 through $40, everybody and their mother were searching through their closet, finding the bags, and I mean 90% could be had for around spot. And I was actually just talking to one of the two largest refiners / mints in the U.S., and head of their trade desk was telling me that back in those days, he can't even tell us how many bags, how many ounces of 90% they melted down during that time. It was just so scarce. And right now, nobody would do that because it commands a nice premium to spot. So it's really indicative, that more than anything, as well as what the market's doing, is the supply is only from customers, investors selling it back into the market. So if nobody's selling it back into the market, there's nothing anywhere.
If I might add on to that, John, if you go back in the history, and I'm gray-haired enough to do that, there was a bag market and a bullion market on the commodities exchange, on the COMEX, and there was arbitrage going on because a bag was worth 700